Hi, today I'd like to talk about my book, LDS and Muslim Outreach. That's the name of the book. My name's Robert Robinson. It's free, the ebook version's free the first day of each month on Amazon. I've been able to set up that way so far. Hopefully it continues. The book's all about my 7 years as being both LDS and Muslim, the questions I came up with, and the answers I eventually found. I put them all in this book. The book's about 100 pages. It's not that long. First chapter, of course, is on Jesus. That was my primary question, was Jesus. It turns out Jesus was the non-sexually begotten Son of God. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there was no sex involved. There was no physical relations between Heavenly Father and the Virgin Mary. Mary was a virgin when Jesus was born. How they accomplish that? Well, he didn't say. So, I suppose artificial insemination would be one way. I'm sure God knows a million ways to do it, but Jesus was the genetic Son of God. Now, the second chapter is on Aisha. My big question was about Jesus and whether he died on the cross. Turns out he did die on the cross, but he wasn't killed on the cross because he had power over life and death, and they didn't have the power to kill him. The Romans bragged in vain they'd killed him because they really couldn't. They bragged in vain they'd forced him on the cross. Because remember, Jesus said, I have 12 legions of angels at my command. Remember, just one angel wiped out an entire Syrian army in one night. Just one angel wiped out all the firstborn of Egypt in one night. Jesus had 12 legions of these guys at his command. That's 72,000 angels straining in their armor waiting for the command. But Jesus never gave the command. He did it because he knew he had to. He chose the moment of his death. He chose the moment of his resurrection. And he opened up the gates of hell to let out all the spirits who have been trapped there since the days of Adam. All the righteous spirits. Some still have to wait. I'll get back on track here. When the Spirit strikes me, I cry a bit, so please forgive me for that. Chapter 2 is about Aisha. That is the big question in a lot of Americans' minds, is why would Muhammad marry such a young girl? She was actually a child. She was in her 9th year, which meant she would have been 8 years of age by our standards, the way we calculate age. Turns out they had femicide in Muhammad's day. It was a big problem, and they just didn't see any reason to keep the girls because they didn't see any value in them. Financially, they were on the point of starvation at some points, and so, well, anyway, God solved that by ordering Muhammad to marry a child. So he did. He married her when she was only in her 6th year, but he didn't touch her until she was in her 9th. So he waited 3 years. During that 3 years, he was responsible for her financial welfare, make sure she, had everything she needed. He was responsible also for her physical protection because there were no policemen back then. So it was nice to have somebody that was responsible for your protection. And then they gave him social status in the society. They were a full wife. And so, nobody bothered him because the husband would handle the situation if need be. Chapter 3, polygamy. Muslims allow 4 wives in the Quran by Allah. Muhammad had over 12. So it wasn't as if you couldn't have more. It was just that in that day, God didn't want the average Muslim to have more than 4 wives. I see a lot of value in that. You see even like Brigham Young, who had so many wives. I think he had 10 divorces because he couldn't take care of them. And the Quran's very specific that you have to take care of them all equally. So I see value in a limit of 4. Today, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints encourages all their members to wait until they're 18 years of age to get married, and at least 18. And they no longer allow polygamy because the United States government threw all the men in prison, took all their money, took all the churches, the chapels and whatnot. They took everything they could get their hands on. And it wasn't until that point where the church was just about destroyed that God finally says, okay, that's enough. I accept your sacrifice. And so they live monogamy from now on. If you're a polygamist, you could not join the LDS Church today. I totally expect someday they'll change in the future, but for right now, a polygamist cannot join the church. And if somebody's in the church and becomes a polygamist, they'll be excommunicated, or they call it something else today. Well, anyway, you get the idea. They'll be kicked out. They can still attend. Now, if you're polygamous, you can attend the services as long as you're not disruptive, just like any non-member could. Now, chapter 4 is about Abu Amir. He was an interesting guy, a companion of the Prophet. And once he was asked about the shin of Allah, that's talked about in the Quran. And Abu Amir slapped his shin and says, Allah's shin is as real as mine. And so he believed Allah had a physical body, which is the same as LDS doctrine. The LDS believe that too. What about the Bible? Well, the Bible is mentioned in the Quran as being accurate, but it had been adulterated over the years. And so the LDS believe the same way. A lot of Muslims today won't read the Bible because they know parts of it are bad and they don't know which parts. So they just stick to the Quran. But the LDS have an advantage because they had the Mahdi, Joseph Smith, and he was able to correct the Bible and made notations. And so today the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has what they call the JST, or the Joseph Smith translation. They use the King James Bible, the KJV they call it, King James Version, but it has footnotes. It has the JST in it, the Joseph Smith translation. So that really helps out, especially on some of the more difficult passages. Chapter 6 is about the Book of Abraham, and Joseph Smith obtained some papyri that were writings of Abraham, and he translated them. And when I say he translated them, keep in mind he was an uneducated man. The only reason he could translate them is because God helped him, because Joseph Smith had very, very little education. He was born on the frontiers of America, and school wasn't a big issue for the kids that day. They were too busy working and surviving. He did have a little education. He could read and write. That was about it. Now, chapter 7 is about, the Book of Abraham, mentioned in the Quran, and the LDS have that. And you can read it online if you want. I think LDS.org is the church website today. Chapter 7 would be about Zulkarnain, who was the resurrected Jesus. He traveled the world. We know he was in Jerusalem. We know he traveled to the Americas. The LDS do. But the Muslims know he also went to Mecca. And that's recorded very briefly in the Quran. And it talks some about that. Now, some Muslims may not realize that the third stop of Zulkarnain was Mecca. But it was between two mountains, right? So I think that, and the fact he was dealing with various groups that were at Mecca at that time, because some of the lost 10 tribes were probably there as well. And so that may have been the visit of the lost 10 tribes. So this may be a record of the lost 10 tribes. It's probably not the only record, but it may be a record of them. Now, chapter 8 is interesting. It's Al-Qadir. Al-Qadir taught Moses. He was the wisest. Al-Qadir was the wisest man on earth. And Moses was learning from him. And most people don't catch on that Al-Qadir was the mortal Jesus, because they think, well, Moses died long before Jesus, right? Wrong. Moses stayed around until, let's see, what was it? The Mount Transfiguration. So he was still there, and he learned from Jesus. And there's some interesting things there that indicate that Jesus had at least two sons. And chapter 9 is about heaven, 7 heavens that come straight from the Quran. There are an upper and lower part of the spirit world, the LDS know, but the Muslims know there's 2 upper gardens and 2 lower gardens, for a total of 4. They also know there's 3 classes of men. So you add that 4 to that 3, you have your 7 heavens. The 3 classes of men, of course, LDS will recognize as the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial. Chapter 10 is about the Mahdi, which was, the first Mahdi was Joseph Smith. He wasn't Muslim, but he admired Muhammad. And his job was to prepare the way for Jesus' return. Jesus gave him that commission directly, in person. So his successors have been the Mahdi as well, is my understanding. Because it says that the only true Mahdi is Jesus, which means the title came from Jesus, and when Jesus returns, the title will revert back to him. That's my understanding. So Muhammad, he was the seal of the prophets, of the Islamic prophets. There have been prophets all over the world. In fact, there are probably 144,000 prophets in the world eventually. But it says there's 19 angels over hell. I believe today there are 19 prophets over the world. You say, well, yeah, but it said hell. But think about it. Where did God send Satan and his followers, Iblis and his followers? He cast them down here. Where did he cast them to? To hell. So this is a hell. And there just happens to be 19 prophets over there today. 15 are LDS. 3 are the 3 Nephite prophets. And one, of course, is John the Revelator, John the Beloved. That makes 19 in total. I just touched briefly on chapter 14. The woman with the child, it represents the church and the gospel. The woman being the church and the child being the gospel. And they were driven into the desert